It's 7 minutes after. I'm supposed to start this thing off. You guys are making me look bad, like I'm somehow late. I'm not late. I'm right on time. I've got my Boulevard Nitro drop, steep drop actually, and I'm Travis Brungard. I'm in Kansas City, not really Prairie Village, and I'm very thrilled to be your fine home buildinger of the evening.
Nice.
Good evening and welcome to the BS and Beer Show. BS, of course, stands for Building Science. Tonight's topic is the Unbuild It podcast takeover. Is there anything we're doing right, fellas? I can't wait to find out. I've already introduced myself and my beverage, so I'll just remind you all that BS and Beer is an independent grassroots movement to share building science knowledge through local meetup groups and this, our Zoom show. The brew crew and our guests volunteer our time each week to bring you what we hope is a fun and informative discussion. We do need to thank Green Building Advisor and also Fine Home Building, which are our media sponsors. And of course, we thank you, our audience. Thank you for joining us. And now on to Emily with our announcements.
All right. Hi, guys. Tonight I am having a black cherry seltzer with gin. This is a new go-to, pretty decent. And as much as I don't like sour beer, what Peter is drinking sounds amazing. So there's that. Tonight with the chat box, Kylie has her screen turned off. And so if you're seeing Fine Home Building on the bottom of your screen where it says video, you can click on video settings, hide non-video participants if you want to just see the 6 of us on screen. In the chat box, if you're new to Zoom, make sure that you pick all panelists and all attendees so that everybody can see what you're chatting about. Introduce yourself, introduce your drink so all of your friends know you're here. Otherwise, only the panelists know that you're here. So introduce yourself. Right now, we have about 114 guests tuned in. That goes up usually as the show goes on, but that's who's here right now. So introduce yourself. Fine Home Building sends a Zoom link every week. That's just a reminder to show up to the show once you've signed up to come and join us on BS and Beer. If you want to have who's coming up next and bios and all that good stuff, pop over to the bsandbeershow.com and join our mailing list. The video recording is usually up on Friday afternoon. So if you missed the show or you've missed any of our other shows, pop over there to catch that or over to Green Building Advisor on the blog. Kylie will write about what is the next show coming up and also a good place for you guys to ask your questions if they don't get asked during the show. We've had plenty of shows where the chat box is hot and all the questions don't get asked. So continue the conversation over on Green Building Advisor after the show. Also, the audio only version of the show is available for people who like to listen to their content as podcasts everywhere that podcasts can be found. I'm going to add a bunch of links into the chat box for you guys for Skills USA, BS Fridays with Mark Willie and Dave Cooper, Passive House Accelerator, my podcast, and of course tonight, the Unbuild It podcast. We link them every week, but that's who's here tonight. So off to you, Ben, to introduce our esteemed guests.
All right. So my name is Ben Bogey. I'm a project manager and general bearded weirdo. I'm drinking a industrial arts wrench this evening for me and Steve Baczek's mutual friend, James Hartford, who designed their brewery recently. So do you guys want me to actually read their bios or should we let them read their
bios?
Okay.
No, you can read them.
Bios.
All right. Very good. Excellent. So we'll start with our esteemed colleague here, Steve Baczek. Steve started his architecture career after a harsh critical review of his performance of Swan Lake with the Boston Ballet left him emotionally shattered. Following that pointless start, he sought a new angle and enrolled in the East Central Massachusetts School for Wayward Boys, where he pursued the ability to spell his name without using cliff notes. He was eventually able to read a book and was graduated at the dire pleadings of his parole officers. He is best known for his media segments with his beloved Big Red. His fondness for that drawing implement is accredited to it being the only crayon he didn't eat while at school. His understanding of buildings extends to an awareness that he can sometimes find his way in and out of them using his own intellect. Peter Yost, sometimes. We've been together.
I'm fixed on that image of Stephen Ballet. Hold on.
Before you go any further, Ben, Pete, have you read the bio that he's about to read that's been on their website all week?
Have I?
Yeah.
Did I have to follow a link or participate in social media?
Go ahead, Ben.
Excellent. Excellent. This is what I was hoping for and assumed was going to happen. So here we go, straight from Peter's website, Building Right Peter. Peter Yost is the last person you want involved with any of your construction projects. He has squandered more than 30 years of his life on a pointless pursuit of things no one cares about, like the textural components of a successful granola, how to successfully cultivate moss on a bathroom ceiling, and flatulence storage, the future of farm to table to energy. He is known by a number of federal agencies and occupies a place of prominence on the do not fly list. He resides in the People's Republic of Vermont, where he spends most of his days harassing the youth on social media while warming himself by burning used tires and waste motor oil in a homemade contraption he's attempting to patent.
He's speechless.
The sad thing is about half of those are pretty close.
Oh, God. Fiction imitates life. All right, and here we go. Finally, last but not least, Mr. Jake the Brains Bruton is more than just an adequate friend. He's also a middling home chef. He's well known for searing his hand repeatedly instead of the steaks he's supposed to be cooking. Jake dreams of being an East Coast builder, but is statutorily mandated to not cross state lines. The son of a carnival Ferris wheel mechanic and a truck stop hairstylist, he spent his youth dreaming of having a house without axles. Those formative years led him to pursue his current business of trying to build neon-lit structures insulated with hair trimmings. Jake is often compared to a golden retriever, cute enough that you forgive his drooling stupidity. He's recently learned how to Velcro his own shoes without needing a helmet. And ladies and gentlemen, this is our show. Steve, Jake, would you guys like to introduce your beverages?
Aren't you glad you tuned in for this?
Good use of your time.
Let's let Peter introduce himself first.
All right. I already did. I introduced my bee's knees.
That was before we started, technically. You got to do it again.
All right, I'll go first then. So this is a bee's knees. It's a gin sour, and the key ingredient is honey. And the honey is from our good friend Ian Keller in northern New Jersey. And as I said before, the cool thing about honey is that it changes colors based on where the bees go get their pollen and food. And so the flavor changes a bit. I really like Ian's dark, which can come from tulip poplar, but also the invasive Japanese bamboo type. Knotweed. Thank you. Knotweed. So, but it's got a good flavor in the gin sour.
I wish I was creative enough that Peter didn't actually need to do that. And I would have just got him to do it again. That would have been way better.
Your turn.
My name is Jake. I'm a builder in Columbia, Missouri, and I'm part of the Unbuild It podcast crew. And I have
Jake,
been
chin
sick
up, buddy. Chin up.
I've been sick
Both of
for
them.
like 16
Ben, chin up.
hours. This is why I'm drinking water.
Jake, you get the Purple Heart for the show because you're actually sick today. Steve was just sick on Tuesday. He's already recovered. No Purple Heart for you.
No, I'm
Steve.
not recovered. I'm going to the hospital tomorrow.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh, I feel terrible.
That's all right.
Purple Hearts all around.
So I'm drinking Spiritus straight up. And what is Spiritus, you might ask, Peter?
What's Spiritus?
It is a bathroom vodka made in the northern provinces of Poland from the red potato.
Wait, a bathroom vodka?
Yep.
Did I
Homemade.
hear that correctly?
Holy
Homemade.
smokes.
Good
What,
stuff.
you drink it by the bowl, not the
Is
glass?
that why we're sick? It's because
It's not
we've
a
been
home
drinking things out of
remedy,
your
is it?
bathtub.
Been on it since Monday
Holy
evening.
smokes.
Oh boy.
Go big
I
or
thought
go
you went to
home.
the porcelain toilet to let go of things, not to take things on.
Go
Holy
big or go
smokes.
home.
Typical Navy man.
So where do we start?
Well, Ben wanted to get you guys rolling with a question about, is there anything that we're doing right in our industry? So if you guys have any thoughts on that, we would take them. I suspect that most of you will say no.
And let me frame that with the comment that I know we can all shred the things that we do wrong in the industry. So let's flip it on its head. And are there things that we're doing right?
Wow, there's like a lot of
Silence. Crickets.
Ooh, the dead
Sure.
air.
The issue is that they're all counterbalanced by somebody else doing them poorly. It's not that we don't know what we should be doing. It's not that we don't know what good materials to use, what good methods to use. It's that everybody else, there's a counterbalance to every time we do something good. So every time I install a window correctly, I'm certain that there's 2 being installed incorrectly in the same community.
Probably 20.
I'd say one thing that we're doing right is I think back to, when I first started building in 1980 or so, and then when I went to the NAHB Research Center in 1993, there just wasn't a lot of places to go for information. And now, even lay people have tons of places they can go to get extensive information on building science, building performance. In fact, I would say about half my clients know more than their building professionals that they're dealing with. And they're both kind of scary and also educated because they've been on the internet quite a bit. I mean, I have a woman from New Jersey who doesn't know anything about buildings, but she found Green Building Advisor and then me to work with her on her building performance problem in a couple of hours. So that's pretty cool. That wouldn't have happened 20 years ago.
In that same vein, it's something that, sorry, Jake, it's something that really is keeping us on task as builders, because I found the same thing. Our clients are getting more and more technically savvy and proficient about small, like really finite details of building projects. And it's great to see that level of engagement. It's also, riddles you with anxiety and some complications, because then you have to manage stepping back some of those stress levels for them, because they're often not seeing the whole picture of an equation.
I think the ability to self-educate only goes so far. I talked with a potential client last week. Great house, seems like it's a great fit for us. First client I've had use the term building science without me bringing it up. They are fans of the podcast, fan of the Build Show Network, read some stuff that I had created online. We had an incredible conversation over the course of an hour over Zoom. He brought up the idea of letting us build for our grandchildren and mentioned John Ruskin. And I quickly screen shared and went to the last slide of every presentation that I give that has a John Ruskin quote in it. He's like, that's the exact quote I was trying to come up with. And I got an email from him today. He's going with somebody else. And it's like, that client is as informed a client as I've ever had. And I know the builder he's going with, no offense to that builder, especially if he's here or if the client's here, but he's not going to build as good a house. He's not going to do as good a job. He doesn't understand building science. He doesn't understand what it means to be energy efficient and in control of the indoor environment, but his website says he does.
Wow. Way to throw down the gauntlet, Jake.
Ouch.
That's pretty discouraging. If you
He's
can't
also a
win
nice guy too. The builder's a nice guy too. I don't mean to, but it's the truth. I understand what they do, and I know that they don't do as good a job as we do. And so that client's as educated as any client I've ever had come to me, and I still lose. You know what I mean? Like, it's still, that's a tough one.
The dollar still wins out in a lot of cases, whether or not you're the better builder. Mr. Baczek, any comments on what we're doing correctly in the industry?
No.
Brewing vodka in our toilets?
What we're doing right in the industry. Well, I think we're communicating better than ever. And that's good and bad. Because with a higher level of communication, it creates more communicators. When you create more communicators, you create some nonsense, some decent content, and some great content. So it's dangerous, but we got to get through the nonsense to get the good stuff anyway. But communication, certainly, knowledge is power.
So a bit of a shameless plug for, GBA. When we built that website, 2007 to 2009, there was a lot of discussion about if we were going to have an active posting and commenting section, how was that going to be refereed? There were some folks that, for a variety of reasons, eventually got banned or we had a protocol for how to move through levels of sort of 1, 2, 3 strikes, but it's a little bit, it's tough to encourage people to take risks when they post something, because a lot of people, I don't want to post something, I'm going to look like an idiot if I say something the wrong way. And I think GBA has done a really good job of that exchange being pretty high level, but pretty open at the same time. And still really powerful, real strong editors that know, when to clean things up a bit.
I mean, that's my favorite thing about YouTube, though, Pete. When somebody puts up a video that has one of us in it and they're anti-us or anti what we're doing, Steve pretends to be our father and goes and beats him up for 3 days on YouTube. That's one of my favorite parts of the industry, though, too, is when Steve's just like, "No, you're an idiot. Stop
So
acting
we're on
like
YouTube?
an idiot."
Yeah, Peter, YouTube's
Cool.
a site on the internet that has videos. You can view them almost any time of day, any time of night. All sorts of. You're really gonna love it. You should check it out.
It's
I
like the
actually,
place where you get your VHS from.
Yeah, it's like your TV on your computer.
But believe it or not, I have a YouTube channel.
Is there anything
What's
on?
on it?
Okay,
Who knew?
I know what I'm doing for the next 2 minutes. Talk amongst yourselves.
I managed, this is a
Uh-oh.
point of pride. I had a fine home building video go up the other night, and in less than 3 hours, I got the comment of, "This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen on the internet." That's what I consider success.
Record
Oh
time.
yeah,
It's tough
I come down
sometimes.
on them. I see something like that, I go right for it.
Oh, I play nice. I'm too nice.
No,
I need to invite you over, Steve, when I see that stuff.
exactly. Just yeah, tag me. I'll go after them. I don't care. You see-
Okay, so
yeah,
let's continue this rant about the comments then. I had to explain to my wife that I was going to block her on Instagram if she didn't stop reading the comments and then coming to me and going, "Is this okay? That's our house."
Is
They're
he being
talking
mean to
about
you?
our house. No, she's always just like, "Wait, did you do that wrong?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm good at this. Just stop.
Well, let's not
Stop
push
reading
it.
the comments." I literally told her last week if she didn't stop reading the comments, I was going to block her.
That's a bit of a hair-raising experience for me. It's because a lot of the projects well, you guys get it too. We're putting up this content for clients that's showing clients projects, and then they're inevitably going to see it. So there is those conversations, not to go down a rabbit hole here.
Well, I think the
Well, how do
hardest
you
thing
handle
for
that?
the hardest thing for people to understand is that every climate and situation is different. As much as we want to homogenize building, it's totally different. We put up a video about a zero energy house, and we get somebody saying, "There's no way that system paid for itself in 4.5 years." Yeah, well, when you're paying 22 cents a kilowatt hour, right? It pays for itself very damn quick.
Yeah.
Can you do that in Alabama where they're paying 7 cents? Probably not. But in some places it makes sense. And you get these idiots that say, "Oh, that's all wrong. That's stupid." And no, it isn't. And it's the same with wall systems, insulation levels, technologies in general, is that everything kind of is a somewhat custom situation.
I think that was
That's
one of the really cool things about working at Building Science Corporation was, I had learned how to build in Seacoast, New Hampshire. And then I went down to the NAHB Research Center in Maryland. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a production builder. And I thought everybody built houses the way that my brother and I did, little family companies. I didn't even know there were companies that were building 25,000 homes a year. But at Building Science Corporation, we worked in every client and with pretty much every size of builder. And it is amazing how different the experience is, say, for, hot, dry production builder compared to, super cold New England. I mean, it's like it's not even like, I remember once I went to work with my brother in Alaska, and my first day on the job site, I thought these guys were speaking Greek.
Did you guys live in a parsonage?
You don't even know what a parsonage is. That's a really
I
sad
have no
thing.
idea.
One of my
No
favorite
idea.
callbacks, though. This is an excellent Unbuild It tie-in. I gotta, I gotta remind everyone.
Now I forgot where I was, Steve. So you have to get me
That's
back on
okay.
track.
Somebody else said, "Wow, this joke won't die."
That's dementia sitting in.
Yeah. Anyway, it's Alaska, and different tools, different terminology. It's a wonder that we can move things from climate to climate and context to context.
Well, I can build on that, Peter. At Building Science Corporation,
Good pun.
one afternoon I had lunch with Joe and the biggest builder in the country. And he flat out told me at lunch, I hate building houses. They're the biggest headache for me. He goes, my business is taking big pieces of land, cutting them up and selling small pieces of land.
Yeah.
But I can't do that if I don't put a house on. The house is nothing but a headache for me.
What's funniest to hear you say that about a builder and you and Joe is that the developer is saying, I only deal with houses because I have to. What I want to do is, develop land. And then Joe's sitting there saying, yeah, well, I don't like dealing with houses either, whenever there's people in them, right? So the developer wants to get rid of the houses. Joe wants to get rid of the people.
We'd be far better off.
To the same effect, though, even amongst all of us here, we can all agree on the principles of things, but we're all going to use different products and different orders in which we put them together to achieve the same thing. So it's
Well, it's because you guys are
hung
wrong.
up on people getting hung up and fanboying out on one thing.
Well, that's like Tuesday night, a R19 wall with T111 almost won, right? We never do that here, but hey.
Hey, wait a minute. You brought it up, Emily. We never build the other wall either. I talked about this with Ben too.
True. That's true.
Three wide of brick, exterior insulation made out of wood fiber, and then aluminum. I have never seen anybody even think about building that.
They're doing some really interesting
pretend world.
Yeah, there are some really interesting things that they're doing in Europe with those facade systems, but I don't believe any of them are wood fiber. But it was a cool concept to think about the idea of renovation projects in a city that's big enough to handle something like that. But interesting in the whole dynamic, because most of the rest of the United States is not a city, right? Somebody said you guys don't have it. Was it to you, Jake, that you guys don't have any of those kind of structures in the Midwest?
Mm-mm.
I don't remember.
But Travis, isn't like half of Kansas City T111 on a 2x6 wall?
Everything since 1980. All the growth in our market, I would say half the population in South Johnson County, which is where I'm located, is in a house with T111 on the exterior, what they call single wall construction, meaning no structural sheathing beyond that, quite literally metal strap diagonally on the 2x4s. Maybe if you're lucky, you got one that was built after 92 when they started enforcing WRBs. Before that, you could quite literally put T111 over studs. And, if you're an upgrade builder, you go ahead and throw some R11 or R13 bats in that. Now you're ready to party. That's how it used to be. Wild West.
So I thought we were supposed to make a list of 3 or 4 things that we were focused on. So that's what I did. But one of them fits right now with what
He actually
Travis
did
and
the
Emily were
homework.
just talking about. This issue of Vermont has a Senate bill right now, 109, where they want to weatherize 120,000 homes in 10 years. So that's 12,000 homes a year in Vermont, which has a population less than 500,000. And I checked with Rockingham, a county nearby that's, probably 20,000 people total. Last year, they weatherized 16 homes. So one of the things that's really on my mind is we have all these buildings that are, old and poorly performing, and we're going to try to, with stimulus money, with pandemic funding, we're going to try to build our infrastructure and build, take these 19th and 20th century buildings and drag them kicking and screaming into our century. And we're going to do that and not get the building science right. Because if we're doing 120,000 homes in 10 years in Vermont, they are not going to get done slowly and studiously. They're going to get rammed through. And, I sad to say a big part of my business is going and look at those buildings that got really good energy upgrade packages, but the moisture management didn't follow. So I'm really worried about all this money coming that's for the infrastructure. And we actually checked in Vermont, there is no codified building science training for the weatherization industry. That should.
I don't like how you loosely use the term infrastructure.
Pardon me?
I said, I don't like how you loosely use the term infrastructure.
Steve prefers the term organic.
Is this like the libertarian in you coming out, Steve? That I'm being too expansive because I'm from the Socialist Republic of Vermont.
So we're opening a mold remediation company in Vermont here soon, and we're all going to make $40,000 because there's no money there.
I just want to know who's going to do it.
Is anybody in Vermont going to notice the mold in their house?
Is it going to be more than now?
Wow.
Well, yeah, I'm just going to have more knees bees because
I just went as far as People's Republic of Vermont. These guys are coming down hard.
Well,
hey, I love the Green Mountain State, man.
So we got to make sure that the building science is applied to the retrofit because that's the scary part. I mean, we're building new homes, 2 million a year, but we have a housing stock of 115 million units, and they're not performing anywhere near the way we need to get them to work.
Yeah, in my air sealing presentations, I always quote a Lawrence Berkeley Lab study from 2012, where it's like we could save $12 billion a year on energy if all of the existing housing stock was below 1.5 ACH50. And it's just like that one hurts because that one doesn't even make you put new insulation in. It doesn't, that one's, we look at things like aero barrier, that one's potentially very easy.
Yeah, if there was some way that we could work in at the transition of a property or the sale of a property or something like that, that we could go in and we could aero seal or aero barrier these properties when they're being transitioned or when people are moving, so it's easily doable, we could make a huge impact on our overall energy usage in this country. But
I would like to suggest that maybe we take that money that is required for the home building inspection, that is often a 15-page report of copy pasted with a check mark on each page to make sure that someone read it, and we apply that money on top of probably some sort of energy-based grants to go ahead and make that happen, Ben. I don't think that's out of reach, especially for smaller homes. Like, let's say we make it a deal where if your home is less than 2,000 square feet, you're eligible for the grant, and your home will receive an aero barrier seal in between the seller and the new occupancy. And then if your home is over this, then you don't qualify for the grant, but you have to do it anyway. And then we've basically created the equality of outcome that everyone so richly seeks. Anyone interested in this idea?
You can do the paperwork.
It falls for me in that I'm fairly libertarian, and the only thing that I push for when it comes to government regulation is building codes. So it's a tough one. Like, I live in this weird contradictory land
that has no building codes.
Yeah, that has no building codes.
I think if you're going to put a house for sale, you should have to do some kind of HERS rating, WOFI model or whatever, so that in order to put it for sale, people have a comparison on what they're going to do. Because hopefully that means those people who have chosen that as a business have gotten their own training and will think water management first and kind of say, hey, this is what you're at. Like, how else do you compare a home? You walk in, you're like, this looks beautiful. But if you see any of those home inspections, you're like, oh, hey, homeowner, do it yourself, didn't connect the plumbing, it's leaking in the basement. People don't know what they're buying. So instead of get rid of the home inspection part of it first and make the sellers do that before selling. Just everybody has to. You're going to sell it, you have to do it.
We have at least in my market, in order to get a home loan, you have to have a radon test performed. It has to pass, or you have to remediate. It seems to me that air leakage is as big of a villain in a lot of areas as radon. I know that I listened to the Unbuild It on radon. I get it, guys. I know it's a dangerous gas. It's not as fun as vapor, another favorite gas of the Unbuild It crew, but it is worth noting that air quality is kind of the new frontier of excitement. It's the current darling of building science, I would say. And so maybe air sealing could be an important part of that process, and we could make a big difference if we can make that happen. I think the Unbuild It guys are the perfect spokesman for this. Go.
Go ahead,
Well,
Peter.
the code has to be better than what it is to start out with. The code's still allowing 5 ACH 50 in some climate zones. It's just sillyville. Like, what are we doing? Are we treating everyone like idiots? Do we all have to be?
I was gonna say that's fun. You get to test it and get to 5 ACH 50. We're not even doing that.
No. Well, we
A
don't have
visual air
statewide code either.
inspection, because that's always a good one.
It's good when you can see air.
So there's a neat program in Vermont that connects some of this stuff to dollars. The Efficiency Vermont folks that were working on retrofit teamed up with a local health center and discovered that, you know, the emergency room visits related to poor indoor air quality could be, if you could connect the health costs with the building science of how those homes are working, there's an opportunity to reduce the energy costs of the building and actually improve the indoor air quality in the building and reduce the visits to the emergency room. And one thing that was really interesting about this was that, you know, a lot of people in Vermont that are getting retrofits are elderly, and they did things like trained the energy auditors to look for tripping hazards in the home, because it's tripping hazards that's like number one for why elderly people end up in the emergency room. So it was, to me, what was interesting about it had nothing to do with building science, right? But it was making connections about when you can get inside somebody's home for one purpose, but your real goal there is to improve their well-being, reduce their energy costs. You know, what else can you do while you're in there? So it was an unusual coupling of health insurance companies, local medical centers, and energy efficiency. You wouldn't think those would be bedfellows.
That's really interesting.
It was pretty cool.
Also, while we're on the subject, Peter, the threshold of the door behind you looks like it might be slightly uneven. Please be careful coming and going through that door.
The tripping hazards I'm facing are more related to this than the height of the. But thank you, Jake. There's a tear trickling down my cheek because you're looking out for me.
Well, we have to take care of our elderly.
Does that mean you get flagged if you have a bar in your house? Just asking for a friend.
Oh, I don't think they were allowed in Vermont. That you can't go after people's home bars. No way. That's a step too far.
When we moved into the new house, I was putting liquor into a cabinet, and my son said, "Is that where you're going to keep it?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "What about that over there?" And I said, "We're going to have that there." And he said, "We're going to have it in two places?" And I was just like, "Oh, it's like talking to my wife all of a sudden." We're going to have it in two places? Sorry, there's some in the fridge too, and there's a fridge upstairs that has beer in it.
I didn't see the humor in that.
I could see how you didn't see it. I could understand that you didn't see it.
So there's mention of it in the chat box here, but I think the general thing that we're talking about is like mandating a HERS score or something like that for property sales, which I know anybody here who's been on Zillow or any of the real estate websites, anything like that, sees that there's usually now a spot for HERS scores. And I know that there are some counties and jurisdictions throughout the country that require that for the sale of the home. I think that's really just kind of our first step to push to kind of make people aware of these things and take these things seriously. And then once you kind of have market acceptance of that, then we can push for measures like aero sealing or weatherization at transfer of properties and stuff like that. Because there's the quip that we're not going to build our way out of this problem. So we really do have to affect the existing housing stock if we want to reduce energy. And if we just
Problem becomes. Go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
No, so if just quick thing, if we even just remove environment completely out of this thing, because that's a hot button topic for a lot of people, it's just good stewardship for us as a country and as a nation and as a society to maintain our use of resources. Why do we want to use so many things? And we can protect our stability as a country and a nation by being good stewards of these things without even talking about environment.
And now you made me lose what I was going to say. I was listening instead
here
of
for you.
thinking while you were.
Yeah, well, try
It's
listening
my
to the conversation
lovely new mic.
and also doing the chat. I can't multitask like that.
The chat's dead to me this evening. You guys are too active. I'm sorry. Somebody's going to have to read it to me if we want to interact with it.
A point in every direction is no direction at all. Hey, speaking of which, this probably really dates me.
Get
The
that
land
from a
of
fortune
point.
cookie?
No, it's from the land of point. Nielsen, was that? Who was it? Who's that guy?
It sounds like a fortune cookie.
Yeah, I'm dating myself. Carbon dating myself.
Oh,
That's more like it.
never confuse talking for thinking. That's my new favorite quote.
That's good. I like that.
Jim Harrison.
So I'll just throw it out there. How do you guys all approach the subject of climate and carbon, embodied carbon and energy? How much attention do you think we need to be paying to that as an industry?
So we don't talk about climate change or carbon at all with our clients. I mean, obviously, if they bring it up and it's important to them, we talk about control and comfort and energy efficiency and durability. And then we have, in the last 5 years, been very blessed that we've had clients that almost entirely just listen to the way that we want to do things. That I just say, okay, well, this is the insulation that we're using. This is the WRB that we're using. All of this stuff is just in the scope of work that I send to them that also comes with a set of plans. And so then it's in writing, it's there, it's what we're doing. And they just go, okay. And so I don't have to have arguments with my clients over our carbon footprint or spending more money on things to be a little bit better steward towards the environment. The GPS insulation that board instead of the XPS insulation board. We don't talk about XPS. We just use the one that we think is the right one.
So I think what you're getting to is you're trying to make decisions throughout your process to be conscientious of this. So you as a firm, you're trying to be conscientious of these decisions.
And I think I heard Steve say this, you're the professional, act like the professional. If you act like the professional and you demand to be treated as the professional, they'll respect your opinion. You got to assume that 95% of the people that go to the doctor every day don't argue with them and go, yeah, but I read and I think, so why would we let people do that to our industry?
We don't ask the waiter at the restaurant to see a line item cost breakdown of that steak we just ordered.
Yeah, my new favorite thing is to ask the gender of the animal. Was this fish male or female? Because half the time they'll go, I'll ask. And that's the only. I don't care about the response. I just want somebody to go, I'll ask.
That was almost funny.
Thanks, Steve.
You, Steve, what do you feel about carbon and climate and material choices?
I'm trying to think. Do I want to give you the real answer, or do I want to give you what you want to hear?
Never confuse talking for thinking.
Yeah, no, I know.
Ben was never going to hire you anyway. Just say what you feel.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I think, like I said, I mean, Jake makes a good point, and I did say, we're the professional. I mean, when you're building a house, even a small little economical house, there's still thousands of decisions that have to be made in there, and not all the time can the right decision be made for the right reason. Right? Sometimes they're made for other reasons. Like, when I was talking with Emily on her E3 podcast, if you haven't listened to it, you should. But, you know, I cited an example down in Texas. You know, you spec cellulose in the wall and the contractor comes back and says, well, we can probably get cellulose if I look into it. It's going to be more expensive than if we just sprayed open cell foam in there, right? It's, you know, you guys you guys are kind of the tipping point of the decision, right? Like I can spec a lot of things and there's some builders and clients that just adhere to it. And we do that. But there's other ones that when the builder starts throwing we could, we should, it'll be cheaper. It's hard to battle that decision and hard to, you know, hold your feet or hold your ground. It's a challenge. You know, there's times when a hot roof makes sense, and at least in my eyes. I mean, I vent until I can't, but there are times where a hot roof makes sense, and there's just so many decisions. It's hard unless you're building the same, you know. And then this is the crazy part. Like production builders are the ones that could make the biggest difference because they're building 80,000 houses of the same house. So their one decision just goes through. I mean, I did work for a production home builder, and in our heyday, we were building 600-700 homes a year. Right? I mean, do that math. I mean, you go there and it was like, you know, you'd see the foundation of the house here. You'd see the wall framing, the roof framing, and the stucco all on the same street of the same house. You know, it was a production line. It's just the people moved, not the house. And there it was actually real easy. And the owner of the company there was a very smart guy, and he was conscious of a lot of things. But the other thing that he taught me is any decision at that level, you know, a $10 decision when you're building 600 homes a year, you know, that's $6,000 on a $10 decision. So if I make a $200 decision on insulation, what does that do for me in a year?
Yeah.
Right. And the biggest problem is there's somebody that's going to build the piece of crap which people are going to compare it to.
That's just as pretty.
Right. And they're going to put you up against that. Like, why does this come out to, you know, $185 a square foot? This guy claims he can build for 155. Well, yeah, because he's building total crap. You don't want to live in that house. We'll be tearing that down in 20 years if it doesn't fall down before then.
And factor in how much it's going to cost them to move, because in the first 3 years they lived there, it was either too expensive, too cold, something broke, you know. I don't remember if it was you, Steve, that used the example. It might have been Jake on the podcast. I've talked to a bunch of you guys that $150 faucet is going to cost you twice as much when I come back to fix it, because you didn't choose to put in the $300 faucet the first time. And now you got to pay me to come back and replace the faucet. And, you know, there's just...
Well, there's 1,000 decisions, but there's certain levels to those decisions, right? The $75 kitchen faucet versus the $350 that you use there. Yeah. The plumber's coming back. I mean, the plumber that I work with locally here on projects, homeowners have that. And he just tells them, he said, I'm going to be back here in a year replacing this faucet. And it's going to cost you $200 for me to come back. Just go get a good faucet, put it in and forget about it. And the faucet companies, they're making a killing. I bought a Kohler faucet. It was short of one piece. So my wife called and ranted on them. They sent us a whole new faucet. She says, well, do you have a tag? We'll send the other one back. They're like, nah, just keep it. Yeah. Right. So what does that tell you?
They're not worried about your one faucet.
Yeah. They're not worried about my one faucet. I should call them back and say, hey, this one failed too.
This one's missing a piece.
Yeah. Open up a plumbing business based on
Steve selling faucets
at my house.
While we're on the subject of Emily's podcast, which is fantastic, by the way, I did listen to Steve on your podcast, and I have a bone to pick with Steve. Steve recommended a book that is on my bookshelf, The One Thing, to me, like 2 years ago. and he admitted on Emily's podcast last week that he hasn't finished that book. Steve is recommending books to people that he hasn't finished reading. And I was like, what if we get super racist at the end? Like,
Okay,
you have to read
we have to
whole
clear
thing.
the air here
shut
first.
up for a second. Peter,
Steve, do you actually read books?
Peter, quick question for you, Peter.
Got it.
When you read a book, can you tell in the first 20 pages whether it's going to be a good book or bad book?
Are you using Pete as the canary in the
Yeah.
coal mine here?
I am, because Peter's intelligent, not your riffraff crap I got to listen to. That's it. Leave the room, chicken.
I have a good friend in my family who reads the last sentence of every book first. And that is how she determines whether it's a good book or not.
That's horrible.
I know it sounds horrible, but you got to read more than 20 pages to know what a book is about.
This is
not
a good
even
book,
read
though.
more
He
than
was
20
right.
pages?
about. I'm saying, can you get a sense of whether it is a good read or a bad
He
read?
purposely didn't answer your question.
I know.
He's
That's what
he's
Peter
fence
does.
sitting.
He has intellectual,
depends.
evasive maneuvering,
Go ahead and book me.
and he has very bad puns.
Emily, you didn't drink. Jake said it depends. You got to drink.
So I want to come back to this question about talking to clients about global climate change. I think it's a real sort of no-win situation. But I have sort of two answers. One is because I'm a resource economist by training, the way to level the playing field in this issue is to figure out what the cost is and build it into the price of what we're doing. If you externalize the cost, then you'll never get people to really respect that issue. And
Yep.
So you could say, well, we can't agree on whether climate is a big enough issue. And we have to do that first. The building codes started because a group of people got together and said, hey, it's not in society's interest to have these buildings burned down. So we need a code that everybody has to build to make them fire safe. And everyone went, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. But before that, you could build whatever you wanted. It didn't matter if it burned down. And then in around 1980, we said, you know what? There's an energy crisis. So now we're going to add the public good of energy efficiency into the building code. And we agreed upon that as a society. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody in society agreed, but it meant as a society, we said, yeah, this is an issue we have to take action on. So I think we need the codes to reflect what public goods we're talking about. And I strongly believe that climate change is something that we have to address as a country. Because if we don't, we're just being totally unfair to our kids and their kids.
To piggyback onto that, I think we also need to go ahead and mandate, since I'm now big government, even though I'm a registered independent, I think we do have to go ahead and enforce the code, because having the code doesn't do you very much good if your local jurisdiction can just opt out of the energy code, as so many of my local codes do. We have codes enforcement in every jurisdiction I work in, but some of them are on the 2008 and they have amended out all of the energy code. So we're no better than the visual air barrier inspection that you're performing up in the Northeast. It's not going to make a difference if the option is, oh, you can still build that crap. No, that's fine. We just look, we did the minimum. And then we also ignored everything that mattered. We took that out. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think if we can get to the banking community, because they are financing homes that are grossly different in their real value and not capturing that at all. I was doing a 2-day building science training up in northern New Hampshire. There's about 15 or 20 builders in the room. And way in the back, there was this guy in a 3-piece suit. And so, the first thing we do is everybody introduce themselves, and he got to introduce himself last. And half the builders didn't even know that this guy was in the back of the room. Then I said, what about you, sir? And he goes, oh, my name is so-and-so. I work for Laconia Savings. We hold all of our mortgages. We don't sell them to, secondary or tertiary markets. And he said, so I think I need to be here, because if we are financing homes that are of grossly different value because of the way they perform, that should be reflected in their, in our loan. And there's all these builders in the room, like Turner, like, what planet did you come from? But at the end of that 2-day building science training, 3 of the builders had cut financing deals with that lender because they hold. It's like that. Steve's heard me say this before, but it's like that scene in It's a Wonderful Life where there's a run on the bank, right? It's because he was holding the notes on those homes in his own portfolio that, he had to tell one neighbor, hey, none of you would have homes if you didn't finance each other, right? So if you all ask for your money, you're all going to lose your homes. And so the idea of keeping the asset close to the financial mechanism, that's critical to having true value be reflected in the asset.
It's similar to how we're seeing niches form in the mortgage brokerage industry now, where they're starting to grow in financing for energy efficient homes and energy improvements, because they recognize the fact that you're going to have a more financially stable client when they have lower and less volatile energy bills after they make these improvements. So we're starting to see, I'd love to see it happen faster, but we're starting to see some growth in that area because it's smart investing on the bank's end.
Which I think would be great if more banks held theirs. And the biggest problem is that they often sell them. And the big financial institutions care less about your ability to keep paying and what they can sell it for if you do default, which is that beautiful kitchen looks great to somebody else who walks in, which is why I think that having the HERS rating and saying, well, yeah, that kitchen looks great, but this house is a dog and it's going to cost you whatever.
Well,
so I'm glad that financing's.
Even when we say like, oh, they should all have a HERS rating, you should have to have a HERS score to be able to sell it. Every system is gameable too. I have another builder in my market that builds a pretty darn good house that he was showing me HERS paperwork, and he had a HERS score lower than my personal house, but the house is 6,000 square feet and it has 2x6 walls and it has fiberglass insulation. And I was like, how is that? I have R42 walls. I have very efficient air, like we have a 0.43 air ceiling. We have a really well-built, really well-constructed house. And the score is misleading. And I was just like, oh, I'd never really thought about it as the same as every other gameable system in our industry. So that's when we talk about it's not one size fits all, all of those things are such a huge challenge that I think that's why, for the most part, they don't get tackled.
Yeah, I was going to say, since I do a lot of building assessments and building investigations, it's a real double-edged sword on how far down the physics you go with people, right? Because if you tell them their house is really simple, that's not true. But if you tell them their house is super, super complicated, that's also not entirely true and scares the crap out of them, right? So I agree we have to be the professionals, but some of the stuff that happens in buildings is pretty easy to explain to lay people. Sometimes it's really hard to not do it without taking up 3 or 4 hours of their time. And they're just as happy to have you be the adult supervision. Like, hey, I don't need to understand that. That's why I hired you.
Steve, still with us?
Shut up, Jake.
I was going to say, so another topic then, what do you guys think is the best way for home buyer education? Right? Because maybe that's what, I agree, Peter, there's things that are hard to explain, but what are the top 10 things that people should know if they're going to buy a single family home? And what's the best way to impart that wisdom on them before they buy or build a home?
I've never thought about that question from that standpoint before.
Maybe you should do less talking and more thinking.
Steve, did you say less talking and more drinking or thinking?
Funny guy. Jokes from Vermont.
The toilet vodka's kicking in.
You can offset that with some Wheaties.
I mean, that's certainly the problem, right? I mean, Pete, we talked about this before, that homeowner knowledge. Like, people know less about the house they're buying than the car they just bought. And the house is 3 or 4 times more than the car, but they don't care. Oh, the builder says that it's what he's going to do. Yeah, okay, whatever. He meets my price point, so we'll just do that.
You think starting with the basic control layers would be valuable for a homeowner, or you think that's too dumbed down? You think where's the right first step?
Well,
That's a tough one.
I think the biggest step is moving them from it's a property decision to it's a performance decision. And you know, a bunch of you've heard the story, but when I was working for the Environments for Living program, which was a Masco program, this is back just after I left Building Science Corporation. You know, we did these focus groups with 3 different types of buyers in 6 different markets. So the first time buyer, the move up buyer, and the luxury buyer. And there was a facilitator, and for 45 minutes, he or she encouraged these potential home buyers to talk about what's important to them in a building. And guess how many times in the first 45 minutes for 18 different groups in 6 different markets and 3 different types of buyers, guess how many times the building's performance came up?
Guess in
0.
the chat was 0. Yep.
0. And then
It's too complex.
after 45 minutes, we would ping the facilitator, and that was an indication that he or she should ask this question, which is, well, what about the performance of the home? Like, you know, the bonus from above the garage. And every single focus group, as soon as they introduced performance, for the next 2 hours, you could not get these people to shut up about the things about their homes that didn't work right. So what's the moral there? It's a totally untapped potential that people don't think of their homes as performance items. They think of them as assets or property. But when you move them to think of them as a performance item, you can't get them to shut up. So there's a big opportunity there it doesn't take much to move them to, it looks good from the outside. There's a fire hydrant next, you know, that's good too. There's a 2-stack foyer. I like that. But they're afraid of their building home's performance. You know, it's intimidating to them. Just like if you buy a complicated car or a high performance car, you know, what do? Well, you don't work on it yourself. You get somebody to work on it who understands how its performance is achieved.
Not if you're in Missouri. You throw that baby right up on a couple concrete blocks and you have at it.
Only if you got a nice shade tree.
I was gonna say those people also apparently like to work on their houses repeatedly, right? I mean, there are 2 different types of people.
They got that in Vermont. Hey, Peter, that house that we drive by on the highway that has had zip taped for probably at least 8 years, and it's still fully exposed.
Sadly, Steve, the guy finally finished his project. I drove by the other day and he's all done.
So something that I can say that kind of sums some of this up for me is that we don't necessarily have to be educating people and home buyers on the science of what's going on or on the materials. What we need to do is we need to be selling them or explaining things in the light of the health that is going to be the outcome of this, the comfort that's going to be the outcome of this, and the durability that's going to be the outcome of this. Because when you start to, get people scared that, oh, wait, my house might be poisoning me, or I'm going to be freezing in my bedroom, or this is going to rot and I'm going to have to replace it in 5 years, that's when they start to understand it, because it takes it back to an emotional thing that they can relate to instead of this physics gobbledygook that we start throwing at them.
Yeah. And the bridge is durability. I think if you can tell people what they're going to have to fix later, and they dread that, they see that as, well, I don't want to spend money on fixing that later. If you can express these details in durability problems that are either already solved or in need of being addressed, then you get more of a buy-in on those control layers, typically for me.
Or just that you're going to be the person that is thinking about those things. They don't even have to know about the control layers. It's just the fact that you can explain it to them in a fashion that they can comprehend, as that's why they need to hire you, or these are the things they need to think about.
I'd like to
What
go
I
back
find
to it.
interesting about these kinds of conversations, working at building science. I've had this conversation 25 years ago and heard exactly this conversation that we're having this evening, right? It hasn't changed. Joe would talk all of these things up exactly the same way. He was light years ahead of everybody, but as prominent as he is, here we are 25 years later, and definitely Joe changed the way we build for sure, and the way we looked at things, but we're still having these conversations. And I'd be willing to put money on that in 25 years. Yeah, maybe Peter and I will be able to have that conversation. But in 25 years, I'm guessing that we're going to have the same conversation.
As long as
25
Peter
years,
doesn't
you
trip
can
over
still-
that threshold.
I'll still be two digit old, not 3-digit old, but it'll
There
be
you go.
close. Hey, I
And
want to go back
how
to
do 25
you always
years.
claim you have 102 years of experience. How the hell does that happen?
Dog years.
Oh, it's
Gotcha.
nonlinear math.
Gotcha.
Hey, I want to go back to what Emily said about, do we have the ability to like pick the top 10 things that people should know about their home? I worked on a thing called How Homes Work, and it was basically building performance for home buyers. And I've taught it like a half a dozen times for both people who are going to buy new homes, but people who are interested in understanding how their existing homes work. And I think there's a real opportunity for us as a building community to do that. Pick 10 things that could be 10 slides and tell people, hey, look, if you really want to think of your home the same way you do your car, the way you choose a phone, or the way you choose a laptop, this is how you do it for a house. That would be really, really helpful, because we don't need to tell them about continuous control layers, and we don't need to teach them building physics. We have to teach them is sort of the connection of building attributes to outcomes or to services rendered. And I've never done like, hey, let's just pick 10 things. That would be, and really it could be a standard slide deck that everybody has access to. And I never charged for doing these. Well, actually I did charge for a couple of them, but most of it was just, industry education. And then I did get clients out of it.
Do you want to send me a rough draft of that, Peter? I'll start using your slide deck.
I didn't say I would do this. I said we would do this. This is a communal thing. This is how we do things in Vermont.
Draft.
We do them together. But there's no granola involved.
We seize the means of production.
That pissed me off, the granola one. The rest was okay, but
I don't think I've ever eaten granola. And
So
it's
what kind of tire burns best, Pete?
it's the bicycle tires, because it's a surface area to mass thing.
That was quick. Good for you. That was good.
He's got experience.
He's from Vermont. Don't they all ride bicycles there?
Yeah, we never get tired of conversations about burning tires.
But I can't take credit for that. I mean, I asked the question, but when Mike and I were presenting on the Pretty Good House, actually at Better Buildings Vermont, something like that came up about a home builder, or not home builder, but like a homeowner building a home or homeowner buying a home. And, like what are those couple of things that you'd put into like Pretty Good House, like how to do it a little bit better? What things do I have to maintain? You bought a house, it has a heating system. Like you bought a car, it has an engine, or it has a battery, or it has a thing. It's like there's no such thing as zero maintenance. And yes, you have to like this. I don't know. Do you know what mold is? Do you know what causes mold? Like, I don't know. It seems like a good idea.
I'm turned away because I'm looking for a book by a guy named Charlie Wing.
I thought you were looking for the fluke. The fluke's not sitting on
Fluke?
your shelf today.
I think
Yeah,
Steve
that's
read the
because you
first
guys
couple pages of
embarrassed
that.
me into moving it.
And where's
I felt
the
like
hat?
I was shamelessly. Where's the wingnut hat? Steve made me promise that for BS and Beer, I would not show or wear my wingnut hat.
Oh man.
Although
Here you go.
when it gets
Here you go,
stormy, I do wrap it in aluminum foil because that further protects my lobe, my front lobe.
From the walls in, is this the one you're looking for?
No, I don't know that one.
I think he
Was that
wanted
Charlie
from the
Wing?
window to the wall.
Yeah,
by
this is
Rogan.
this is old. This is a like 78 or something like that.
Now he's got a book called How Houses Work, I think.
Oh yeah.
But it doesn't talk at all about performance. It talks about systems, which is another thing, you know. But if you only have like an hour and only 10 things, I think it would take some real thought and work to hone it down to those 10 things. But I think that'd be really valuable.
But people already check like roof. Generally, people are looking at the condition of the roof. People are hopefully getting a septic analysis done of the septic systems. And so we've got the big ones, but we need to, what are the more granular items, you know?
Yeah, and Steve and I were doing I think it might have been a Huber training in Connecticut, where a home inspector guy showed up. Do you remember that, Steve?
Yep.
And he was a building science-based home inspector, which was, I'd never heard of that before, but he was pushing for ASHI. I think that's one of the organizations that represents home inspectors. He was pushing to get building science education into the home inspector community. And one of the things he said was their margins are so tight, the reason they have that template they use is because they get paid pretty poorly for all the systems they have to check in a building. And adding some building science to that is hard.
The crux of the building inspector thing is that if they really do a good job, then they usually grenade the sale of the property. So the ones who do a really good, thorough job are not getting called back again.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I had a couple of people that bought houses recently when I came in to do assessments said, well, where were you when I was buying the house? And I said, there are not many people that invite me to come, do building assessments as a precondition of sale. The realtors aren't real happy about that.
What else is on your guys' list?
Well,
I thought you were in the list and Steve was the host. This is very confusing to me.
shut up,
This is
Travis.
good. He's had a lot of references to the podcast. He clearly listens to the podcast. I hope then he recommends it to people after he's had the ability to accurately consume it so that he can
Listen,
make
I'm 3/4 of the way through the book.
about-
Stupid. All right.
Well,
I know
that's
enough about it to get an opinion.
Well,
Jesus,
that's a
I
great.
read every freaking page.
I was gonna say that's a great tie in there, Jake. Though
Mhm.
is people know who you are, maybe, right? Because we said Unbuild It takeover, but you guys haven't talked at all about the podcast, why you chose to do the podcast, how often it comes up, all those good things. So
Take it away, Pete.
Boy, if you've asked somebody to do the sales job, you picked the wrong person. Okay, Steven, this is Jake's idea. He convinced Steve of it. And then Steve told Jake, we really need to bring Peter in. And
He
so
convinced me because he knew the only way to get you was to hook me and drag you in.
but the cool thing about it is there's a builder, an architect, and a building scientist.
And somebody else.
Somebody else. So 3 very different perspectives. Jake is young enough to be my son. Steve is young enough to
Don't
be
watch
my
movies
younger
in black
brother.
and white.
Yeah, but that's with the talking movies, right? So that we have very different perspectives in terms of age. I disagree with everything they started this whole thing about. The name, it's like Unbuild It. What the hell? But I figured, what do I know? And then they said, well, we're just going to pick topics and talk. And I said, we're not going to do any preparation. Preparation, that'll destroy the whole thing. It's got to be spontaneous.
That's a good Steve impression there, by the way.
Yeah.
Nah.
Shut up, Jake.
But it is pretty
He's asleep
amazing.
again.
If we pick a topic, we do get a builder's perspective, an architect's and then somebody focused on building performance. So it's been a ton of fun. Way more fun than I thought it was going to be, frankly.
It's fun for those of us in the audience.
It publishes the first and third Thursday of the month. You can get it on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, all of Amazon Podcast, all of them. And we do have some new stuff coming in the future where we're going to expand a little bit, but we're not going to get into that yet. We're just going to tease it a little.
But Jake, this was your idea, and in part, is it true because you had a guy on your staff who had some tech savvy that we could tap?
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation with Steve about the most valuable conversations I've had when it came to building science, were you and him and I walking around show floor at a trade show, just shooting the shit all day. Yeah. Just going, well, what about that? Oh, well, I had this happen one time. And I was like, why aren't we should share that with somebody. Somebody might want to hear it.
To your credit, gentlemen, I think that the beauty of the Unbuild It podcast is in what Peter talked about, the broad viewpoints, but also your willingness to go super simple and then super deep. Like you had 2 episodes on the control layers, but then had just one on the blower door. And when you started calculating the fan curve live, I know you lost like 98% of your listenership. And I only had to listen to it 4 times before I gave up figuring that out. But I think that really speaks to the breadth of your knowledge, of course, but also to the value of it, because you understand that there are people who are coming at this from different levels of expertise, and you're speaking to all of us. And sometimes the thing that we think we know is the thing that we forgot. So I think that the approach that you guys have taken is what is the success of the show, at least for fans like me. Also, the fact that you haven't had Ben Logie on, probably a pretty big feather in your cap too.
Well, and I got to say that Steve's mentioned this, but if it weren't for Joe Stieberg and Betsy Pettit, I mean, you know, that's where Steve and I met. I was a builder, remodeler for a bunch of years with my brothers. We're pretty smart guys.
I remember that day, a walk on the beach, a bottle of wine.
You're making it sound like a date. This is a little uncomfortable.
Just because there's wine and a beach doesn't make it a date. It just makes it intimate.
More or less uncomfortable than the whole episode where they talked all about you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've almost listened to all of that.
But would you recommend?
What I was going to say is that, so then I went to the NHB Research Center. I thought, oh, now I'm going to really learn how buildings work. And then I went from there to Building Green and then on to Building Science Corporation. And when I got to Building Science Corporation, I thought for the second time I understood how buildings worked, and I didn't know shit. So, you know, Joe is crazy as a bed bug, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that he and I don't agree on. But man, he and Betsy put their money where their mouth is. And, you know, that their website, buildingscience.com, they could have made a shit ton of money off of that. People were banging on their doors trying to sponsor that website. And they, for more than 20 years now, have resisted, because Joe is essentially a building science libertarian or socialist. You know, he thinks that all information should be available to everybody. So, you know, we're standing on the shoulders of some people that have been doing this a lot longer than we have.
But with that, Peter, Joe would always talk about how all his knowledge came from people before him.
Right.
And so it's almost like an obligation from working with him to continue the conversation.
Yeah, good point.
In that same line, I have to say that, you know, the BSC website has been, you know, one of the most influential sources of information in my growth as a builder. And then the fact that as I progressed a little bit and I eventually weaseled Joe's email address out of somebody, and that he responds to emails. You know, I'm just some, you know, weirdo off the street, but he will respond to your emails if you send him a question.
Go ahead and post his email in the chat real quick, Ben.
Don't tell Betsy you said that, though.
This was one of the first books I owned. Right? I'm like, code book? Who needs a code book? Somebody needs this book.
Yeah.
I have the very first copy of the building science guide.
Oh,
they did
is it
with
signed
AEC.
too?
AEC. What's funny, you mentioned the Building Science Corporation website, Ben. I a couple of years ago, I actually had a client come to me and we were talking about specifically insulating the basement or something. And they came with a drawing from Building Science Corporation's website, and they were talking to an architect that gave them that drawing. And they said, can we do something like this? And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure we can. I did that drawing.
Yeah, people forget that Steve for 10 years was the lead architect doing all their drawings. Quite a team up with Stephanie Finnegan, who, was the graphic artist who worked with Steve on all those details. The good old days, man.
Yep. Well, there's always a good old day.
And then how many did you do for GBA, Steve?
Did 1,000
Yeah.
for GBA's
Yeah,
library.
a shout out to Mike Girton, who's a longtime fine home buildinger. He was the remodeler who reviewed all of Steve's drawings. And I'm going to say this. I don't know if Mike would like me to say this. We at Green Building Advisor tried to pay Mike like 6 times. Like, Mike, you're spending hours with those two dolts, Peter and Steve, because Steve would do the drawings, Mike would review them, and then we would get together and review them together. And Mike never took a single penny for all the hours he spent. And he said, I don't need to get paid. I'm sitting here with a leading building science guy and a leading architect. That's sufficient pay for me. So he's an incredible guy.
Peter, I don't know if you remember, but we had a meeting at my house one day when we were reviewing drawings, and my neighbor backed out of their driveway right into
his truck.
Mike Girton's truck. And in total Mike Girton-esque, he walks out there and goes, yeah, don't worry about it. He goes, I'll go home and I'll just pound it out.
He loved that truck too, because he had it built into a little camper.
Oh yeah, that truck has seen more miles.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a force to be reckoned with. Real good industry guy.
So if you're not getting the point, there are a whole heck of a lot of other people that inspire us. I talked about them inspiring me. They talked about who inspired them. We want to share. That's why we do the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, at Building Science, the thing that I found that was incredible is almost every day you were talking to some building science all-star who was coming in or out of the door, right? I mean, and I got to work with Coda every day, which was always a plus.
Yeah, I see a note here in the chat. Ken Newhauser, who was a building science employee, calls out Coda and Peter Baker. But yeah, Coda the guy is just unbelievable. And what he can do with an Excel spreadsheet is only exceeded by how well he plays the piano. And it's funny, when you watch him work on a spreadsheet, it's a lot like watching somebody work on a piano keyboard. He's a pretty amazing guy.
Yeah. Well, we're reaching go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so to build on Jake's comment, I think it's really important that when we find something that we're doing right or wrong, but we need to have those conversations to kind of perpetuate success, right? If we're doing something wrong, then we got to find somebody that has done it right and chat with them and find out. And, or if you're doing something successful, then, send it around the horn and let people take a look at it, and maybe they can build on it or learn from it or whatever. I mean, not everything has to be a solution, right? There's stepping stones to where we need to be, but we can't get there. It's kind of like designing a house. The first meeting, I tell people, I'm going to show you 3 floor plans here of potential solutions, but we're not going to build any of these. They're going to get Frankenstein into something that we will eventually build, but we're not building any of these the way they're shown on the paper. And it's the same conversation that we should be having in that, in being innovative in such that we need to really think about where we want to get, but we have have to go through the stepping stones of how to get there.
Is that just not the perfect Unbuild It conclusion? You just wrapped it up in a nice little bow. It's pretty impressive, Steve. You still
Well, that's
got
what
it.
I do.
Well, I realize that that was the perfect conclusion, but let me ruin it by adding on to that and asking you guys to go ahead and tease the upcoming episodes. I know you can't tell us what's going on and what's coming up, but you do have some upcoming podcast episodes that you probably know the subject matter of. You could go ahead and mention those if you like. Is it an ugly list, Jake? Hot garbage?
I think
we'll move then.
on a day where I wasn't sick, I probably would know all of the episode topics coming up.
Jake's the mastermind for the topics. Yeah.
Well,
Now
we talked to
Jake,
that one builder from Kansas City, where I just go
that
off
one
on a
doesn't publish
rant.
for a while.
I believe that I got called a hippie last time I saw you, Steve. Isn't that accurate?
That's
Multiple
pretty
times.
accurate, amongst other things.
And big government today too.
All of
So,
these lives.
Jake, I would say that the big thing coming up is the 3-part series on Windows. That's a biggie.
We have Windows 101, what the NFRC stickers mean, and a window install video or a window installation podcast.
No, install
So we got-
an install video is really cool on a podcast.
It is.
It's like, hey, watch this.
Well, that's a pretty
So
solid
Windows, look for Windows in the next month and a half.
All right. Does anyone else have any parting words, any parting shots, Steve? You know, usually you have something smart to say. If there's anything else, that's it. Otherwise, thank you for coming on,
Usually have
especially
something
for
smart to
fighting
say.
through all of your ailments with
Thank you guys for having us. This is a fantastic show. I love the fact that you guys do this. Thanks for doing it as well.
Yeah, this is a
Here.
prayers up for
Great
Steve
stuff.
Baczek at the hospital. The rest of you, thanks for your time. Good night.
See you guys.